Hello, Internet, and welcome to the 2022 State of User-Generated Content LinkedIn Live. This is the annual report produced by Tint, which really looks at the way that social media, digital media, and using the authentic voice of your customer, your employees, and your advocates can be used to supercharge and superpower your marketing. I am so excited to be joined by the mastermind behind this year's State of UGC report. She's also the mastermind behind the Future of Marketing newsletter, which is a newsletter that's followed by more than 20,000 marketers every single week. And she's also just a cool person in general. So welcome, Yvonne Aldaz. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat today.
Thank you, David. I appreciate the intro. And just a quick disclaimer, you're pretty cool too, just saying.
I mean, they say that you're supposed to surround yourself with cool people. So let's just say that we're mutually cool. I think one of the most exciting things about this year's state of user generated content is the fact that you've added a completely new section, right? We've seen Tint do the state of UGC for years, but we've always focused more on what the marketers had to say. And this year, now we're thinking a lot more, not just what marketers are saying, but also what the average consumer has to say. So what was the onus or the idea behind adding this consumer section on top of the marketer section?
So I like that you brought this up because last year it was just the marketers who we interviewed or surveyed. This year we incorporated the consumer survey because we wanted to get to know or understand their expectations and their behaviors. And then from there, we were able to cross-reference these consumer expectations and behaviors with marketing plans and strategies. And now we're able to tell whether or not brands and marketers are aligned with consumers' needs, wants, and expectations.
Well, and I think it's funny that you say aligned because that was sort of my big takeaway from this section is that, we as marketing and communications professionals think we know what our consumers are wanting or craving. But the reality was, and your research shows this, that there is a little bit of a disconnect. We're not completely in a different state or in a different, world from what consumers want, but it looks like consumers are really focused this year on things like personalized shopping, hyper personalization, deeper connections with brands. And it's ultimately culminated in this idea of consumers are now the informed consumer. How is this informed consumer that you've, put into this section different from like the consumer of yesteryear?
I mean, now we have social media and the internet at our fingertips. And so consumers are more informed than ever. 75% of them will look for reviews before making a purchase. And not to mention, a lot of these consumers, you probably included, me included, we can tell when brands are marketing to us. We can tell when they're being salesy. So now it's really about taking a step back as marketers and figuring out how can we communicate our message in a way that doesn't feel salesy and gets people to buy.
That is awesome. And just a really quick side note for anyone watching out in internet land, if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in the comments here in the LinkedIn Live, and we will go ahead and get at them. If not, you can also tweet at us at Tint, and we have our awesome marketing team that's watching Twitter, and so they'll be live tweeting and engaging with people there as well. So we could talk about consumers all day long. There's lots of great other consumer reports out there, but the real meat of this conversation is all about UGC and how UGC works for marketing communications and now a bunch of other departments, which I don't want to give away that lead. So let's get into theme one. Um, you know, we always look at what are the different metrics and KPIs that marketers are interested in. It was interesting that in 2021, marketers were really focused on engagement first, and then leads, and then ROI. And now it seems like there's this battle between engagement and ROI, and leads kind of has fallen away to be replaced by fan bases and followers and sort of the subscriber counts. So what happened? What changed to make this battle between ROI and engagement go on?
Well, first of all, just because you have leads, it doesn't mean you have revenue coming in. So the last 2 years, we started seeing this shift to the online world. People were on social media more than ever before, and it started becoming this it started turning into this thing of whether or not people were even engaging with brands online, right? And so engagement became this way of building trust. So if you're engaging your audience, uh, you're going to build trust with them, or people are going to see that you're trustworthy. And from this trust will hopefully come some sort of conversion. And from this conversion, hopefully you'll get ROI. So depending on where you sit in your marketing team, you'll have different metrics to track. So for a CMO, that might be the ROI, and for your social media manager, that might be engagement. So it's not to say one is more important than the other. I think both of them go hand in hand, but it's really about asking yourself, what do I need to be tracking and why? So is it awareness? Is it conversions? Is it relationships? So just ask yourself these questions, and then you'll be able to pinpoint what it is that you should be tracking.
I love that comment because, I think especially in enterprise marketers, people think, oh, this is my one metric and we have to own it. And often we lose sight of the interconnectivity of metrics and how they all feed into each other. Going back to the top three that we saw for 2022, it was really interesting. The followers kind of floated to the top when in previous years, it wasn't even in the top five. Uh, Sometimes we hear people say that followers or subscribers is a vanity metric. So is it a vanity metric? Is it something that we need to track? Like, where does that fit into the bigger picture?
I think that's a really good question because, yeah, we have been hearing a lot about followers being a vanity metric. And to an extent, it is because it is. And it used to be super easy to just go online and buy your followers. But then if no one's engaging you, does that metric really matter? Does your follower count really matter? You're just shouting into the abyss at this point. And so, but now it's turning into this thing of, if I'm engaging my audience, people are going to start following me, and it turns into some sort of status symbol. So if you have high engagement rates and a high follower count, then that means people trust you, people like you, and it'll get other people to trust you and follow you. And so I wouldn't rule out followers as a metric to measure. I think you should be measuring it. It just, I wouldn't prioritize it over engagement. But again, it's different for everyone.
That's true. There is not one size fits all, right? That's always the thing to throw out. And going back to what we talked about earlier, it really does all feed into each other, right? If you have a strong and healthy follower base, if you have people that actually care about the content you're producing, they're more likely to produce content. They're more likely to engage. They're more likely to create this reciprocal relationship that marketers that are using UGC and just marketing and comms people in general are dying to have that sort of connection with their audiences.
Totally agree with you.
So we know that 2020, 2021, and now 2022 have been odd years. We're not going to talk about COVID or getting too far into any of that. 2020 really felt like marketing teams were trying to just sustain themselves and continue, focused on business continuity. 2021 sort of felt like there was light at the end of the tunnel. And now 2022 feels like people are starting to ramp up. We kind of better understand this new paradigm. But with that growth and with this ramp and kind of return to normalcy, there are new challenges. Uh, Almost 50% of marketers that were surveyed think that their teams take too long to produce content. And about 60% of marketers feel pressure to create a lot more content way more often to serve a lot of new channels. So, how does UGC and how does the stuff that you've researched kind of fit in to solve or at least, you know, cure some of these growing pains?
User generated content is a really good way to scale your content. So instead of having your team, usually a small team, creating content from scratch, now you can turn to your own customers, especially your customers and your team, in order to produce some of this content and help you with some of the heavy lifting here. So if you have your customers creating content about your brand, then you're able to take this content and fill in your content calendar, fill in some of the gaps with this. And instead of it just being brand content after brand content, now you have a little bit of a mix of this community led content. And like, once again, and actually, I was going to mention that it's 4 times higher engagement rates with UGC than with branded content. So why aren't you using it if you're not using it, right? And so with user-generated content, not only does it allow you to scale content, but it's also way more cost efficient. And you don't have to be hiring a production team or an agency to help you produce this content because the people who love your brand are already talking about it. And why not use the voice of your customers in your marketing to build some of that trust, build some of those relationships?
Yeah, not to reflect on the past, but I think you talked a lot about that in the previous year's state of user generated content. That like a really phenomenal piece of UGC is not just something that can be recycled or just used once, right? Like you could take a fantastic image or story or testimonial, and then that could go on the website. That could go on a checkout page. That could be tweeted. That could be grammed. That could be put into a TikTok, right? Like especially knowing that marketers have so many channels to serve. And as we look to themes further down in this conversation, knowing that there are literal universes of content that we have to start thinking about, uh, really kind of repurposing it across channels, really kind of doing omni-channel UGC seems to be the way to at least save a little bit of sanity for some of our marketing teams.
No, you make a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because user-generated content doesn't only allow you to produce content at scale, but it gives you the time to distribute the content and reformat it properly. Because this is another big problem for a lot of marketers is the reformatting across all the different channels that keep popping up, and then on top of that, distributing it in a way that people actually want to engage with it.
Yeah, and I think, it's all about working smarter, not working harder, right? We have fantastic tools like Canva, where you can do something like a magic resize and it will automatically make the different sizes for all the different social platforms. So it's not you sitting there, thinking, okay, what do I have to do for Facebook today or Instagram today, right? You can really take a fantastic piece of content and just give it legs. And, to your point, I think that's always the part that some marketers struggle with is, oh, I'm just going to retweet it or reblog it or share it in my stories. No, you would use it the same way you would use any creative asset, right? It's a sort of jumping off point for the next piece of marketing collateral or item or creative that you're trying to do.
Yeah, totally. And I like that you said work smarter, not harder. So that sums it up right there. That's what UGC is.
Well, and you can only work so hard, right? Like there's only so many hours in the day. You're still expected to cover all these channels. Like still got to produce that content. So yeah, got to feed the beast, and UGC seems to be a way to kind of get it taken care of, and again, not make yourself just lose it.
Agreed.
So we've always touted the power of UGC, obviously, as Tint is a user-generated content platform. And now the shifting dynamics of 2020, 2021, 2022 have changed the way that we are seeing adoption, right? We have boomers that are now very present on Instagram. We have millennials that are now taking over TikTok. We have Gen Z that are like fervently searching for a new social platform because they're angry that millennials are taking over TikTok. And so, knowing that there is new adoption, people are in new places, uh, you know, where are you seeing really strong usage of user generated content? And where are some places that you think that savvy marketers or, just people in general need to explore deploying UGC?
So the top three that we found in the state of UGC were social media, advertisements, and email marketing. But there are way like more other areas where you can repurpose UGC. And we were talking about this recently. You can put it on billboards, you can put it on print materials, you can put it on your website across product pages, in the review section. So it just depends on what your customer journey should look like. What are the touch points that they're going to encounter as they are interacting with your brand? And then just filling in those gaps with some of your user generated content in order to provide some sort of testimonial, even better if it's a visual testimonial. Um, but that sort of thing, just kind of pay attention to those areas where your customers are going to be interacting. And I'll give you a quick example. The let me think about this one really quick. I'm drawing a blank, but user generated content, for example, when I was flying with Delta a couple years ago, I received a package with the headphones and the mask and all of that. But on the cover of the package was an image of a traveler um in Amsterdam, if I'm not mistaken. And they printed that picture that they submitted to Delta. And they put it on that packaging. They tagged the creator, and at that point, I didn't know what it was even UGC. I didn't know the term, but I wanted to be part of that. And I wanted to submit my own photos because I wanted to be featured on Delta's marketing materials. And so that's the power of UGC right there. You see people like you creating content, sharing it with the brand's resharing it, and it makes you want to participate and be part of that community. And so I thought that was a really lovely example of how you can use it on more than just digital. You can go as far as putting it on print as well. Key cards, if you're a hotel, for example, on screens if at an event. So just really think about all these different areas where you can repurpose it.
Yeah, I love that idea of thinking sort of beyond the feed. I think a lot of the time when we think of user-generated content or social content in general, we think, oh, it needs to live in social networks, right? It needs to
Mhm.
live inside the feed. But your example of the Delta magazine is great. Your example of, hotels putting it on key cards, I believe like Lowe's Hotels is doing that one. A favorite of mine is when Coca-Cola was doing their Name a Coke
Mhm.
promotion, and all the cans had the different names. And they were out there sourcing content from Instagram, getting the legal rights to that content, and then putting it on billboards, right? And billboards are as analog as you could probably think, right? Like short of you putting UGC in a phone book, which that'd be curious if anyone's listening and you've put user-generated content in a phone book ad. We'd love to talk to you because that's just something cool and very different, very retro. It's very hipster. Um, but yeah, putting it in billboards or putting it on digital out of homes. And, there's so many new places where there are screens. We recently had a team lunch and we went out and got burgers. And at this sports bar, they were showing TikToks there inside the restaurant. And so, for me as a non sports person, it's like, great, I don't have to watch ESPN. I can sit here and look at TikToks on the big screen. And so, really, break the mold. Think where can uh, content go that it's never been before, or that people will unexpectedly find it because they may be delighted, and then you get that surprise moment like you had with your Delta magazine, and now you want to engage, you want to create, you want to be part of that content conversation.
Totally. And consumers are, I mean, I'm sorry, don't get offended, but they are strange creatures. When you think something's going to work, it usually doesn't. You have to kind of think of a different, unique way, what type of content you have to be unexpected. I think that's what I'm looking for. So how can you surprise them, and how can you be different, and where can you share content that they're not necessarily expecting? So just think about these things.
Yeah, it's all experiential. That's the name of the game going forward. So I know you might be sick of it. It seems like everywhere that you watch, listen, or read, people are talking about the Great Resignation, or the new one that I just heard recently was the Great Reshuffling,
Mhm.
which okay, I guess we're decks of cards, we're not people. Um, so it seems like marketers and comms professionals were significantly impacted by this. I think one of your stats says something like one in every four has changed positions within the last year or so because of this great resignation. So now we're seeing user generated content, specifically employee generated content, being deployed uh, to improve corporate culture and to help with retention and help with recruitment. And I'd love to explore that a little bit. So let's start with one side of the coin. On the retention side of the house, keeping employees around, keeping them happy. How have you seen brands or people use EGC to keep their folks from being part of this great resignation?
Well, first of all, I can't stand seeing companies forcing employees to share content. I think it's very different than having them share content about your brand without any expectation. I feel like Hootsuite does this very beautifully, by the way. I know last year they did like a week off in the summer, something like that, and everyone was talking about how amazing it was. Um, and as an employee, you see this, and you makes you want to create more content about the brand. But to your point, retention, how do we retain employees with employee generated content? Well, as a company, don't limit them from sharing content, encourage them from sharing content. Let them know that it's okay, because you should want to help your employees build their personal brands, because at the end of the day, that is going to reflect on your brand. So look for those employees who want to establish their personal brands, who want to become thought leaders in their space, and give them the power to do that. Give them the tools and the resources to create content about your brand. So, whether it's a white paper that you have, whether it's a social media template for them, just figure out how to help them, because a lot of the times employees don't really know what to share. And I feel like people would kind of need a little bit of guidance in that sense. So do provide the resources.
Yeah, I think, letting human resources be part of the conversation is really important. When you think to what the job market looked like at sort of the advent of social media, a lot of the time when you were hired, you get an HR handbook that says, do not be on social, you should not be online when you're at work, you shouldn't be on Facebook on a work computer. And now this is a major paradigm shift from that, where they're encouraging people to please talk about us online, please share content, please be on Facebook. And so, if especially if you're an enterprise or legacy organization, you should make sure that your hiring practices, make sure that your employment practices, make sure that your HR handbook is not still stuck in the early 90s. I saw one recently in a small business workshop that we were working with, and there were still references in the HR handbook to Friendster. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
if your HR handbook is still referencing Friendster, then you probably need to update your social media policy. That's my one takeaway from that. So, I mean, I'll talk smack about Friendster all day long. Let's talk about the other side of the coin. You've recruited people, or you've retained people. How do you recruit, or is there anyone that's doing something really cool with recruitment and UGC to get people in the door and hired and backfilling these jobs that are out there?
Oh yeah, Chipotle is a really good example here. If you go to their careers page, scroll all the way down, and you'll see there is a gallery of employee-generated content called hashtag People of Chipotle, where employees are sharing content about their experiences working there. And so if I wanted a job at Chipotle and I went to that careers page and I look through all their values and I see that it aligns, and then I see this really cool gallery with people who are working there happy and smiling, then the chances of me applying are only going to increase, and I'm going to want to work for that company. So similarly, Cisco is another one. They share employee stories across their blogs. And so that's another really, I think, really interesting take. Like, it doesn't just have to be a gallery, but you can also be interviewing your own employees about what it's like to work there. You can create this content, they'll share it with their followers, and hopefully someone will come in and want to work with there too. So there are a lot of different ways you can get your employees to share content. It can be visual, it can be blogs, it can be testimonials, but there are a lot of different ways you can encourage them to create content in order to attract talent like them, if not better.
Yeah, I think going back to your previous statement that consumers can be very peculiar, or consumers can have interesting interests. One of the things that I've encountered recently on TikTok is there are some fast food influencers, and these are people that work behind the lines flipping burgers. And so often, like, that's the way that you poo-poo someone's job, right? Like, oh, it's just flipping burgers. But they have humanized making burgers, and they're on TikTok live for 5 or 6 hours making burgers and talking through the process and just sharing about their life and perspective and joking with their coworkers. And it's so intriguing. I will say I don't watch all 5 hours of their TikTok live. That's a lot of time to watch someone making hamburgers. But it's interesting to see. There's 4 or 5 thousand people sitting there and engaging with this person who, quite frankly, a lot of people would look down on, right, or look down as like the smallest or lowest unit of an organization. So, it's just interesting to know that it doesn't have to be the perfect piece of content. It's not necessarily going to be your leadership sharing a white paper or writing an article. It could be the guy in Atlanta making burgers at 10 o'clock on a Thursday that's like all of a sudden become your ultimate advocate for your brand and your organization.
It's exactly what we were talking about earlier. People want the unexpected, and this flipping burgers is a perfect example of that. I follow plenty of accounts. Duolingo is another one. It's just their mascot dancing around. They have their attorney creating the whole TikTok around what to do, what not to do. So again, people want the unexpected. They don't really want to feel like they're being sold to, and that applies to employees as well and talent.
Well, and I think that's always one of the great things about sort of newer strategies within the marketing and communication space, right? There's a lot of room for experimentation. So you can showcase someone that is mixing paints. You can showcase
Mhm.
someone that's making burgers. You can have someone in your green owl costume acting just bizarre on TikTok, right? There's lots of room for experimentation. There's lots of room and bandwidth out there. And as you develop this sort of new brand voice, this collaborative brand voice, there's just the opportunities are endless, not just on the content creation side, but ultimately what your followers, subscribers, and the people that like your content will produce and share back with you.
I agree, and I don't know about you, but I'm a sucker for behind the scenes content. I love seeing that. So your social media manager can teach what it takes to run a campaign or launch a campaign, where your VP of sales can talk about what it takes to close a sale or what their favorite sales have been. Or there are a lot of HR can do like um, top things we look for in candidates. There are a lot of different things you can do. So it really just depends on where you are in your team, and then figuring out what it is that you can teach them that maybe they don't necessarily expect.
Yeah, we've always said that people trust other people, but it seems like now more than ever, people want to buy and engage with brands that demonstrate, thoughtful representation and a dedication to, sort of the growing and more publicly visible diversity of the human experience. And so I was so very happy and pleased to see that your fifth theme in State of UGC 2022 was really considering how brands can more effectively and not just effectively, but authentically embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's just start right there. How can brands get into DEI in an authentic and not condescending or icky way, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, I mean, we're going from this shift of hiring models that are that look a certain way, that act a certain way, but with user-generated content, you're able to naturally diversify your content. You are bringing in people from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different races, and you can incorporate this in your own content. I feel like H&M is a brand that does a really good job at this. You see people from all over the world sharing content about the brand, no matter their skin color, no matter their background. And it creates this sense of diversity and inclusivity. And it kind of takes away the need to even hire paid models or pay them in the first place, at least like in the at that at the amount that we have to pay these models. So user generated content and back to employee generated content does provide this organic raw diversity for your brand.
I think one of the sort of running jokes in marketing is that we have the obligatory photo shoot where, especially like in higher ed or corporate hiring, where you have to have someone of every gender, someone of every race, someone of every age group, and it feels so inauthentic. So, what would you say to brands that are kind of struggling with that degree of authenticity? What are the dangers of fake authenticity as they approach DEI?
I mean, over the last 2 years, we've seen consumers just comment on brands' profiles for feeling inauthentic, for not hitting, for missing the mark, really. And you don't want that. You don't want to face backlash from your consumers because it does put a little dent in your brand reputation. And so by incorporating user generated content, you kind of cut through that. You're able to again, be more genuine and authentic with what you're representing as your brand, and the values that you're representing as well. Um, so just going back to that, just again, use user generated content in order to diversify the content that you are using in order to make your audience feel included, to make your brand feel different and authentic versus, again, hiring a model, which most people will know it's a paid model. They don't mean it. And so you kind of cut right through that with by using your own audience.
At the risk of just perpetually talking about how amazing you are, I think one of my favorite things that you added to this section specifically uh, was talking about the idea of DEI being truly expansive, and sometimes we as marketing professionals being sort of narrow in scope of it. And so I loved the section where it talked about inclusivity and access, right? Like social media tools have so many built-in functions now where you can add alt text or you can add accessibility for screen readers. What else can you say about this, other part of DEI that's about inclusion and accessibility for folks who, may access or engage with the world in a slightly different way?
Well, inclusivity goes far beyond your skin color and your race and your background. It can also include people with disabilities. So if you're visually impaired, for example, sure you can't really look at a visual. So now you have to add the description to the background so that screen readers can capture that and read it out loud to them. Same thing with closed captions on TikTok and Reels. Now it's embedded in these apps. You can easily click versus you having to write out word per word in your video like we used to before, which was very time consuming. Now you're able to just do that. But then it's far beyond social media. It also goes to your website. Is your website does it provide the experience? Is it accessible? Is it different? Are you able to find everything you need easily? And a lot of the times you'll find more often than not that no, it's pretty hard to navigate through your website. And I don't want to bash anyone here, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, that's probably good. I'm sure our lawyers would be like, yeah. And I think, that's interesting. We often think of DEI, or at least not often, but uh, pre 2022, pre COVID, I think a lot of the conversations around DEI sort of fell on human resources, right? Like you would have an equity group, or you'd have some sort of like employee resource group, or some sort of element internally. But this is such a great way for people to very publicly demonstrate their dedication to, aligning with the consumers' goals and values and perspectives on the world. And, going back to the fact that we've seen major shifts in digital usage, there are more people of increasing age that are using social media, which means that they may be using screen readers, or they may be using magnifying glasses or magnifiers to engage with content, and just the proliferation of digital access, right? Like 2020, 2021 forced people online in droves. And now people that you may not have ever thought would ever engage or access your content or be part of these content conversations are now front and center, and many of them are becoming, creators and part of this creator economy. So access seems like such well, DEI broadly seems like such a great way to sort of tap into that conversation.
Absolutely.
Really quick plug, if you have any questions for Yvonne or myself, please go ahead and put them in the comments below. They will get popped in. We can chat about them. If not, you're also welcome to tweet at us at Tint. Team will go ahead and forward those to us. So, Yvonne, I have a confession.
Oh God.
I know I have an addiction, and it makes me feel bad every time I use it. But I sometimes just really get caught up on stock photography. I love me some Pexels. I love me some Unsplash. I love me some Adobe stock, and especially now as we start to see. That visual content and visual content marketing is like truly the forefront of omnichannel marketing. You know, it's stressful to try to get all this content together. So sometimes we lapse and we just go ahead and pull up stock photos. But I think in the guide or in the paper, you talk about one of the most exciting opportunities for marketers being able to cast aside the chains of stock photography and explore new content and new ad formats and new things that are out there. So, given this rant and my confession and my inevitable mea culpas that'll come later, what are the exciting new formats and placements and treatments that you are looking forward to see UGC deployed upon?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to judge you for using stock photography. I feel like a lot of us do that. But again, this is why user generated content comes in. If you are able to teach your audience to create content about your brand with your product featured and you create some sort of repository of this content, they can go back to it and reshare it when you need it. So just giving you those little 2 cents there before I move on. But the most exciting part of visual content for me is probably video, right? I'm not going to dive it too much into the metaverse section just yet. I don't want to give anything up, but definitely video, especially because of platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels. We're starting to see this influx of video content across users and employees as well. And so, I mean, we are doing this right now, obviously, and we're probably going to end up doing a lot more video next year. So I am really excited of seeing video content in general, just because we're going to start seeing the personalities behind the brands, and not just the brands, but consumers as well. Consumers will start submitting video content around product testimonials and like their skincare routines and stuff like that. So I really like that because it does let people's personality shine through versus just your static image, which can only give you so much.
Yeah, I'm really excited, for those that are watching, if you have not seen some of the videos that are coming out around the state of UGC, we had the entire team shoot them on their smartphones because again, it doesn't have to be an elaborate photo shoot or like film shoot. It can be authentic, it can be real, and realistically, most of our phones shoot like in 1080p, so you can't tell the difference. And then the phenomenal Serena is packaging them, doing some cool stuff, and so I'm excited to see just like what we internally are going to be doing. I also want to uh, just talk really quickly about some of the comments that are coming in on LinkedIn. The first one just said, "Gasp," when I confessed to my stock addiction. And then someone also confessed that that's their addiction as well. And so I will also say, there are going to be cases where you don't have the perfect piece of UGC or you don't have the perfect piece of content. And the idea, like UGC will never replace everything. It's all just a really effective tool in your marketing toolkit, right? So you can mix a background with a piece of user generated content and then animate it in your favorite tool like Canva. And then that goes out into the universe, right? Again, it doesn't have to be just a raw piece of content from your staff or from your employees or from your consumers. And I think, again, a great example is the videos that are coming out from the Tint team created by Serena, because we filmed them and some of us look a little bit rough. Speaking about yours truly, some of us look rougher than others, but you can still go in and tweak it and edit it, just assuming that you have the legal rights to go and repurpose that content. Which obviously, if you're using employee content, it's a little bit easier. So, thanks for those who commented in. Please do not judge me, and we will go ahead and keep on going with the conversation. And also thanks to Victoria for chiming in, saying that she loves the idea of offering UGC and creating more engaging content over using stock photos. It's okay. We're all guilty of it. It's like smoking cessation. You have to just get like the anti-stock photo gum. You have to get a rubber band and just snap it on your wrist every time you think you're going to use stock photos. And then we'll get through this together. This is going to be our 2021 resolution. We're going to get rid of stock photography and just keep doing cool things with user-generated content. So on to our, really exciting kind of closing theme for the state of user generated content. In October of last year, we saw Facebook change their name to Meta. And from 2020 and 2021, there were sort of these rumblings of what would ultimately become the mainstream metaverses. So we had things like concerts on Fortnite. We had stores opening storefronts inside Roblox. We had people running special events inside Minecraft. And even now, we have folks like Nike who are buying agencies and companies that build digital assets. So I just want to ask, where does UGC fit into Web 3.0 and the metaverses? This kind of brave new world that's coming down very quickly.
I mean, if you think about it, the metaverses, Web 3.0, all of this is being created by users. So, in a sense, it is user generated content. It's just different. So, when we ended up surveying the marketers, a lot of them actually said that yes, the metaverse is going to impact my strategies. How? The majority have said, I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen. And so, right now, we are currently facing this era of experimentation, if you will. We are all trying to figure out where our strategies are, how our strategies are going to change. But I want to give you a quick example. I don't have it up with me now, but if you look up Walmart in the metaverse or H&M in the metaverse, you'll be able to see how shopping experiences are going to change. And for example, if you're in the Walmart metaverse and you're shopping for a wine bottle, the the screen will pop up and it'll give you the price of the bottle. It will give you the details of where that wine came from. And then you'll also be able to see reviews coming in from customers. So that's the UGC part there. Now, if you look at the H&M metaverse example, there's a video on this. You're walking into a brick and mortar in the digital world, and you see a bunch of billboards and signage, and all of these are different areas where you can incorporate user generated content in the future. Reviews about the shirt that you're buying from H&M, how does it look on other people, and then not to mention, it's starting, the metaverse is also turning into this shift of bridging both the physical and the digital worlds. It's very, very interesting to watch because let's say Gucci or whoever comes out with a limited edition handbag, then you'll be able to purchase that handbag maybe from social media, from someone, something, an influencer posted. You'll be able to shop that handbag, and because it's limited edition, maybe you'll get some sort of limited edition NFT that'll go up in value as you keep trading it. And so there are just lots of different ways user generated content is going to play a role here, because at the end of the day, these worlds are being created by users. Everything that you see there is going to be created by users and the brands respectively. So, so yeah, it's just really, it's really an interesting time. What in the world is going to happen? We really don't know. I think we just all have to pay close attention to what the brands with the big bucks are doing, and then just kind of try to mimic some of that, or do it better.
Yeah, I really like what you said about, you know, this being sort of iterative, right? Like we've seen trends or technologies and practices come and go. We've seen the sort of development of UGC as a field of practice and as a strategy within the marketing and communications profession. And this is just the next iteration of that. And I think with user generated content in the web 2.0 side, it's sort of a bi-directional conversation, right? You have your brands and you have your consumer or your employees, depending if it's UGC or EGC. And the platform in between is just kind of a facilitator of that conversation, but really it's the brands talking to the consumer and that relationship that occurs, from the customer side, from the content side. With Web 3.0, it seems like the platforms are much more integral to the conversation, right? So it's, instead of it being two ways, it's a triangle where you really are thinking, am I in Minecraft? Am I in Meta? Am I in augmented reality? Am I in Roblox or Fortnite or any of the existing metaverses or the metaverses that are yet to come? And how do I, as a brand, engage not just with the consumer, but also build something interesting and experiential on the platform itself, kind of outside of that consumer relationship. And so that's My hot take on it, I think the cool part about it is no one knows where it's going, so anyone can make a hot take, and we can just back it up a little bit later if that's not what actually happens in a couple of years.
Yeah, no. And I do want to chime in here and just say that the content, the user generated content that we're going to see in these worlds, is going to be a lot more than just your photos and NFT art, or yeah, I mean NFT art, but that's also going to be your audio. It's going to be books. It's going to be interactive experiences. People will be able to create their own homes and design them however they want. So I am super excited and pumped about where this is going. But like I said, if you're a brand with deep pockets, I think this is the time to start experimenting, and you kind of have to be okay with it failing. But I mean, it's a learning experience, and it allows you to kind of gain a little bit of market share along the way.
Absolutely. Well, we are sort of done with the formal portion of this. We have a couple of questions that have already come in for those that are listening out in the universe or the metaverse or the
Ooh.
metaverses. If you are on LinkedIn, go ahead and drop your questions in the comments below. Or if you are on Twitter, go ahead and tweet at us at Tint, and we will get those questions in. So if you give me 1 second, let me pull up some of our questions that are coming in from the metaverses. And the first one comes to us from inside the building there on Houston Street in downtown San Antonio. So the question is, for all of the research and information that's come out of the State of UGC 2022, what was like the one aha or big surprise that you had in the findings from the report?
I'm thinking about this one. I definitely, I want to say that one of my favorite ones was like the informed consumer that we were talking about earlier. I didn't really think that was going to be a trend at all, but just to know that consumers know what you're up to is kind of a big one for me. And of course, the metaverse is another really, really big one. Just the idea that nobody really knows what in the world is happening, and we're all kind of in this same mental space together, like what's next, what do we do now? I was just really surprised to know that yes, it was impacting everyone's strategies, but no one really knew how it was going to impact their strategies.
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback on the informed consumer piece. We often think, when we're looking at our funnels or flywheels or whatever instrument of journey tracking that you prefer or is in vogue at the moment, that when we are doing top of funnel work and when we're trying to inform or guide people to consideration or at least purchase intent, that we just need to let them know, hey, we have a quality product, hey, it's good, hey, we're fantastic, hey, it's not going to like poison you or just be a bad person or whatever. And I was really intrigued. Last night I was scrolling TikTok as one does, and there were all these people creating videos talking about, oh, we don't want to buy from this brand because it turns out we figured out that they're drop shipping them from Alibaba, right, or from AliExpress, and so they're like really vested or invested rather in like how the sausage is made. Or going back to our McDonald's burger flipper person, right, like people want to see how sanitary the back of house of McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's or whatever burger joint of your preference. I don't want to get that guy fired, so I won't say which one it is. Right? Like people have a vested interest in knowing not just that the product is good, but that the brand is good, that they're good to their people, that they're good to their customers, that they're socially responsible, that they're responsible politically, that they're accessible, right? The expectations for brands are so very high, and again, user generated content seems to be the way to prove that, because you can scream all day and night that I'm great and I'm awesome, but you really need these advocates, whether they be employees, consumers, stakeholders, that say no, for real, they're actually cool people. Please buy the thing.
Fun fact before we move on to the next question, younger consumers, your Gen Z and your millennials care a lot more about the values, brand values, whether or not things are sustainable, things like that, than your older generations. Your older generations, and you'll see in the study, they didn't really care as much. And so I thought that was another really interesting piece that we found.
Yeah, that is intriguing. And when we started working on State of UGCs together, I think we were talking about how soon Gen Z was going to be of legal drinking age.
Hmm.
And now, as we're working on this State of UGC together, first off, I'm a lot more gray. So it's been a couple of years, uh, and based on where that cohort is, and based on my knowledge of the TV show Euphoria, like Gen Z is out there drinking and partying and doing all the things, right? So it's not like Gen Z are these teeny boppers or little kids that are watching like toy unwrapping videos on YouTube. Like these are folks who have recently graduated from college, that are in the workforce, that are full grown adults, and this is just the first couple of years of them, right? This is just kind of the vanguard of them. So as we look towards the rest of Gen Z and even Gen Alpha in the horizon, that I believe is turning 7 or 8 this year, this is just going to become more and more of a crucial element and part of the way that you strategize and articulate your brand values and your brand perspective.
100%. Totally agree with you.
Cool. Another question coming in. The question is, if someone is getting a lot of content coming in, which is positive, but it's not the right type of user generated content, what should that brand or organization do?
This is a good one. This is at this point, if you're getting all this content that you really don't like, the quality's not there, it's your job as the brand or the marketer to teach your consumers what type of content you need them to be creating. So I like to call this full UGC or full EGC, where you can get your own employees to create some content, and reshare that so that it starts teaching and guiding people as far as what type of content you're willing to reshare. And then not only that, but tell them what type of content you need and want, and how to share it in the first place. So it's really a lot about guidance and teaching your audience what it is that you need from them. And by doing it, and you kind of need to do it first if you're not getting the results that you want.
Yeah, I love that. I think we sort of do it intuitively as marketers, right? Like especially if you're in food and bev or hospitality, there's the table topper that's leave us a review, or here's our hashtags, or here's our social handles. People want to share content, people want to be part of that social conversation. And so the more that you can do to empower them and be really explicit about what you need, I think the more likely it is that people will want to engage, right? Like if you need photos, tell them, hey, here's our hashtags, post a photo on Instagram. If you need reviews, tell them specifically, please review us on Google Reviews, right? Take all the guesswork out of it, make it as easy or streamlined as possible. Or, maybe even launch a microsite and let people directly share user generated content directly with the brand itself, and skip some of the rights management piece, and skip some of the other parts that are often the harder parts of dealing with user generated content. Launch some sort of digital experience, be an experience builder and collect content in that way.
Yeah, totally. And you'll see in the state of UGC, the majority of consumers want to be told what type of content to create. So there's your stat right there. Just teach them what content you need from them. Show, don't tell.
Well, Yvonne, I so very much appreciate you. I appreciate all your time. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything else you want to share with the folks out there before we wrap up this presentation?
Yes, two things. Number one, go download the State of UGC report. If you find anything interesting in there, just be sure to tweet at us at hashtag SOUGC, and we'll be resharing some of this content on our own pages. And then two, subscribe to Future of Marketing. I lead that newsletter. We're hosting podcasts with marketing leaders around the world. And if there's anything that you want to see from us, don't be afraid to shoot us an email. So be sure to subscribe to that as well.
And I will say the podcast is fantastic. She interviews some of the top marketers from around the world, just really interesting conversations. Really, I don't know how you do it. You just like draw insights out of them. They're just so comfortable around you, Yvonne. And so, watch it. wherever you get your podcasts. I listen to them on Spotify. So really go check out the Future of Marketing podcast because it is really, really fantastic. And it's just one of my favorite listens, as you know, Yvonne.
Thanks, David. Appreciate the good words.
Always, would never lie. So, in the comments below, you can see that there is a link to the State of User Generated Content report. Thank you so much for everyone who listened in. Please, again, sign up for the Future of Marketing. It's good enough for 20,000 other marketers, so it's probably good enough for you. And on behalf of myself, on behalf of Yvonne and the entire Tint team, thank you. Go out there and make some awesome content, and we'll see you on the next one of these LinkedIn Lives. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.